So today I'm trying my hand at James Hoffman's coffee-forward, nerd-centric tiramisu. Took a bit of time. I made my own Ladyfinger biscuits, but boy, is it good, especially if you like coffee. It's got a super coffee flavor that comes through, and stay tuned. I'll show you how I made it. To make the tiramisu, first step is to make the biscuits. Now, Ladyfinger biscuits that you buy at the store are actually better for this recipe than homemade, generally, because they're drier and they absorb a little bit more coffee, but unfortunately it's just after Christmas and the 3 grocery stores in my neighborhood were sold out of Ladyfingers, so I'm going to have to make my own. It's a pretty simple recipe, and first thing we do is we've got 3 eggs here separated, so I've got 3 egg whites going into the bowl, and I'm going to whip this until soft peaks form. I'm starting to get soft peaks, so I've got 100 grams of sugar here, and I'm going to mix the sugar, half the sugar in, and then mix it to stiff peaks. You can see that those are pretty stiff peaks. So we're gonna set that aside. And now I've got the 3 egg yolks, and that's going into another bowl. And into that I've got the remaining sugar, so we're gonna add that in. Now this, we also need to add a teaspoon of vanilla. And we need to mix this up until it's pale, at least. You can see that's looking pretty stiff, pretty pale. Now we need to fold the egg whites into this mixture, and then we will add the flour. This is done very gently so we don't crush the egg whites. That's folded in fairly well. Now we've got about 120 grams of flour here, and I'm gonna sift that in, folding as well. So this seems to be pretty well incorporated. Oh, still a little bit of flour there on the bottom. Okay, that's pretty good. Now we need to get this into a piping bag. Piping bag here. Might have to do this in 2 batches. Piping bag. So here I've got a cookie sheet with parchment paper, and you can see I've got lines on the bottom side with a Sharpie. So these are 10 centimeters long, which is the size of these, and that'll just help keep it a little more exact. And these need to be about 1 centimeter. Piping is done. You can see my evenness here is not great, but these are going into tiramisu, so they don't have to be exactly right. I got 24 Ladyfingers out of this batch. So I'm gonna put them in the oven at 350 for about 10 to 12 minutes, 1 tray at a time, just because, just to keep it even. And I'm gonna dust the ones, just before I put them in, I'm gonna dust with some icing sugar. So this is gonna go in the oven. These have cooked for 12 minutes, and they're just starting to get brown, and they're just sort of firm to the touch. So I think those are done. Gonna let them cool on the cookie sheet for a couple of minutes, and then put them on a rack to cool, and I'm going to get these ones dusted with sugar and into the oven. Now to make the tiramisu. This is where things get a little nerdy. I've got 6 egg yolks here. I've got a sous vide circulator. It's at 60 degrees Celsius or 140 Fahrenheit. And I'm going to pasteurize these eggs for 30 minutes in here, so that basically not only are they safe to eat, but it also helps with the texture of the final mix. So that's going to go for 30 minutes, and then we'll need to let it cool. With the Ladyfingers done, now it's time to actually make the tiramisu. Now this is where things get really nerdy. So I've used James Hoffman's recipe, and I'll link in the description to his calculator, which allows you to actually calculate the proportions of everything based upon how many biscuits you're using. So I'm doing 22 biscuits. Now they're homemade, not purchased, but that basically gave me these proportions here. So what I've got is I've got some 330 grams of espresso. I've got some saline solution. I've got 440 grams of mascarpone. And I've got the egg yolks, which I pasteurized. So I need 88 grams of sugar. To that I'm going to add the egg yolks. Wow, look how thick those are. Try to squeeze out as much of this as I can. Now I'm going to beat that for 4 to 5 minutes. So basically we'll see this start to thicken and increase in volume. And I'll do it on a relatively low power. So you can see how that's doubled in size, and it's pretty thick. So I think we're probably there. It's also nice and pale. So now what we need to do is start adding in the mascarpone, and we'll do that in thirds. Slow this down for this. So that's pretty well mixed. James says it doesn't have to be mixed perfectly. I'm just going to give it a bit of a taste. Very good. not too sweet, even though it's got all that sugar in it. So the final step here is I've got the espresso, and I need to add 6 drops of this saline solution. So I don't have a dropper, so I'm just going to have to take my chances with this. That's 6 drops. So if you don't want to go through the making the saline solution, which is basically 20 grams of water and 5 grams of salt, you could just probably add a pinch of salt, and that would be fine. Now we're ready for assembly. So one of the challenges I had was having a pan that fit all this, so I ended up going with this tinfoil pan, and I should be able to do 2 layers, 11 each layer. So the way this works is each of these biscuits needs to be dipped the unsugared side down just for a second, and then put into the pan upside down. And this is half of the coffee for this row, and I have room for one more skinny one here. So we want to actually get all of this coffee onto those biscuits. So now we're going to start brushing it on until we use it all. Now I feel like I've saturated those biscuits pretty well. I still have some coffee left over, and that could be because I didn't end up using or being able to squeeze all my biscuits in there, so my coffee ratio might have been a bit high. So I'm just going to go with this and not force this coffee into it. So now we're going to use half this custard and put it on top. So that looks good. Throw the rest of this in here. I expect I will have coffee left over at the end. So now we'll repeat the process. So yeah, I've got a fair bit of coffee left over, but you can tell these are pretty saturated. If I press on them, I can see the coffee coming out. So that's as far as I'm going to go with that. Now let's top it with the rest of the custard. There we have it. So that's going to go in the fridge for 24 hours. And then I will finish it tomorrow with some cocoa powder, and we'll see how it tastes. So it's been about 24 hours. This has been in the fridge. 12 hours probably would have been good, and you can go as long as 48. But now is the moment of truth. So first thing I'm going to do is dust it with some cocoa. Now I'm going to try to cut this and not make a huge mess. And there you can see what it looks like. So you can see the layers. There's a little bit of coffee on the bottom. Let's give this a try. It's very good. The coffee is nice and strong in the biscuit. Although the custard is quite sweet, the coffee really balances it out. And the homemade biscuits have kept their structure as well, so they still have a bit of texture. That is very good. Well, I hope this inspires you to give it a try. I will link to James' video and also his calculator for ingredients in the description. But I think it's worth the effort. Thank you very much.